You've got to get a hold of yourself.
Of the underground. Of the underground.
Haven't you had enough?
got to let it go, baby. You got to let it go. You got to let it go, baby. You got got to let it go. Got to let it go, baby. You got to let it go. You got to let it go, baby. You got to let it go. I'm about to go. I'm about to go. Hard as a motherfucker, you know who I am. I'm about to go. Hard as a motherfucker, you know who I am. I'm about to go. Hard as a motherfucker, you know who I am.
I'm good. I'm here. What's going on, people? Welcome to Generation Orange. We're here every Thursday at 7 p.m. Myself and Sean ready to speak Dynamo, talk Dynamo, and all things Dynamo with a little hint of Dash there from time to time. But we're starting off today's show with with preseason, Houston Dynamo preseason. Obviously, a couple of y'all went down to the Valley and went to go support the Dynamo, and I guess to some extent the Rio Grande Valley as well. And they had a little scrimmage down there, which I think the Dynamo ended up winning 5-0. I think it was like 4 30-minute matches or something like that. One of the positives was getting to see everybody out there playing basically for the most part. One of the few negatives, if any, was at least got injured in the first little match, but nothing serious, just a little dinged up or whatever. But everything's good. Um, but yeah, man. What do you think, Sean? What do you think about the whole preseason with RGV on that all that stuff?
All right, let's try that again. Boy, that's really funny. Yeah, I was saying, I'm excited because it's the preseason, but it's really hard to tell because it's so early in the preseason. Um, George, you were amazing. I'm making some great points, by the way, just in case you were wondering, Mark. Uh, but there's 4 or 5 guys going from RGV, and there's a real possibility that those players may actually have a shot to see real minutes with the Dynamo. I think I'm most intrigued to see what Tab does with Kyle Adams, who's been with RGV for the last 3 seasons. He is on a MLS Dynamo contract now, and I could certainly see him being one of those players that potentially could end up seeing minutes this season at a position along that back line due to either injury coverage or just players needing rest, whatever it may be. And yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, it's hard to tell. It's so early in the preseason. Up until this point, they've pretty much played USL team and college kids, and it's a little different. But we finally get to see them go against Tucson tomorrow, which is fantastic. Or not against Tucson, but in Tucson. And then we'll get to see them against MLS competition, which I think will be great. I am really intrigued to see how some of those players end up performing, because as we've said numerous times, nothing in this preseason is guaranteed for any players, and there's a very real possibility that we may see a player who we haven't put a real high grade on ourselves that ends up kind of working themselves into a starting position. And frankly, I'm okay with that. That's what I want to see this preseason. So it's going to be pretty great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole Tucson Cup. Obviously it's the annual preseason tournament that they go play. I think they won it. Was it Wilmer's first year? I think they won it. But regardless, yeah, it's good. It's good. I mean, finally they get to go up against people, I guess of the same caliber. I didn't see the schedule. I think they're playing the Red Bulls first, and then the next match is against drawing a blank here, but regardless, I mean, it's good to see them, finally getting, I guess, accelerating the preseason, because the season is literally 2.5 weeks away. 2 weeks away actually, on the 29th, and it's gonna be great to finally see them out there playing. I don't. Do you know if they're still gonna be live stream? They're gonna live stream.
They're supposed to. It's kind of the thing that they do while they're there, but I haven't heard any details. But usually what they do is they just do HoustonDynamo.com/live, or they'll actually Tucson will have some sort of stream up for those matches. I suspect that information will be announced really soon.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, especially like you said, he's gonna have a couple of the young kids from RGV, and then a couple of academy players as well, the ones that have been with us. Well, that's been training with us as well. So it'll be great to see what kind of formations and tactics they put out there on the field. Obviously, the preseason, these tournaments, you trying to get everybody in sync and get as much playing time with the, I guess, starting 11. I wouldn't be surprised if the starting 11, or the one that he has in mind for starting 11, get like a good 30, 40 minutes of a first half, and then after the second half would be the reserves, and obviously the RGV players and the academy players. So that's basically what I see from this tournament coming on.
I in the past, and I suspect that we'll probably see a little bit of this in the first probably a good chunk of the Tucson Cup, teams will play a third or half of their starters together, usually kind of like their attack together and then their defense together, but they'll play them, attack in one half and defense in the other half, just to give the young kids a chance to kind of see what they can do, with veteran players either behind them or in front of them, as the case may be. And that's intriguing to me because there are players. I mean, we've talked about Marcelo Palomino, we've talked about a few other players, and look, Luca Toros even practicing with RGV. Now, he's not been called to participate in the preseason Tucson tournament, but he's a player who has the talent capability. If he can show that he's ready to be a true professional, then that's a player that could potentially contribute to the Dynamo down the road as well. And so it's just really, it's just one of those situations where I want to see a lot of things this preseason, and a lot of the things that I want to see this preseason are the same things that I've wanted to see in preseason for the last 4 or 5 seasons. A lot of that hasn't changed. I think probably if I had to pick one player that I want to specifically watch this preseason, and I know you didn't ask the question, but I'm kind of asking it by answering it myself, I would have to say I want to see, and this is going to surprise people, I want to see how Bisama plays this preseason, because at the open practice, it appeared to me that he was playing in a kind of central role during the kind of short-sided scrimmages. And that's interesting to me because that's a player who came to us with a pretty solid capability to pass the ball, and plenty of speed and clearly enough defensive capability to be an outside back. And if that's a player that potentially could end up being a long-term number 8 without having to spend a big chunk of change on a number 8, that's intriguing to me. That opens up a lot of possibilities because, everybody wanted the Dynamo to spend on a number 8 this offseason because we need another guy, another attack killer, right next to Vera. And if Bisama can be that player, and we ended up finding him as an outside back, I mean, that's just that you can't ask for much more than that. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as a international number 8 that's out there. There are plenty of those players out there, but if he can be serviceable as a number 8, then that certainly begs the question of, is it worth playing him there instead of playing him at outside back? And I think you have to say absolutely it's worth playing him there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's the reason for preseason. You want to make sure that you can see what you got in players. Maybe they can play different roles. I mean, obviously, the more roles that you can play or the more positions that you can play, the more chances you have to get on the field. Whether it's a starter or a reliable backup off the bench, and like I said, I mean, Benzema is one of those players that we basically know nothing about at this moment. I mean, I know we played a handful of games last season, but he came in so late because of the whole visa issue and all that stuff. But I mean, he's basically another signing for us. That we have someone to look forward to, and hopefully he does really well, whether it's on the outside back or, like you said, if Tab is experimenting with him as a central defensive midfielder. As we've seen in YouTube videos, he's not afraid to join in an attack. So I mean, it might work out. Who knows? The player that I'm interested in seeing this season, this preseason, I guess, in this tournament, it might surprise you as well, but it's Tomas, because, I want to see what Tab actually really thinks about him, and, and how he's actually going to use him for sure. I know I've heard, stuff about him being on the right-hand side of the midfield, and maybe Darwin playing the 10, and then him moving to the 10 when Darwin goes to the left flank or whatever, obviously the ability of playing different positions again gives you more opportunity to be on the pitch. So I guess we'll see what the primary role that Tomas will play, because I'm pretty sure Tomas will be on the field, obviously. And I'm looking forward to see what he has going and how much his game has improved. But let me ask you a question, man, about preseason. Obviously these last couple of years they've been playing this Tucson tournament. Do you feel they need a change? Or do you feel they need to do
Same.
something different with the preseason?
No, I don't. I think the onus is on the team performing during the season well enough to try to secure a CCL berth, because we saw how playing in CCL at the beginning of last season really, before the season started, really paid off, as we entered the actual season and how well the team played. Because you're talking about stronger competition. I kind of get the sense that that's why they pushed the Dynamo Classic, quote unquote, or whatever they're calling that match that's happening March
7th,
March 7th. Thank you.
27th.
27th. So that it's still pretty early in the season. It's the first half of the season essentially. No, that's only a month into the season, so that's not even the first half of the first half. That's like 4 matches in. But I think that's a good place for that, because it gets you a little bit of opportunity to play against some tougher competition than just MLS competition. And yes, that is me saying Liga MX competition is tougher than MLS competition, almost unilaterally across the board. And getting a chance, even if Cruz Azul don't play their best players, getting a chance to just play against that level of competition, even in a friendly, in a match that frankly doesn't mean much to either team necessarily, it's still good. And I suspect we probably see Tab play most of his young players. He may give some of his senior players a few minutes here or there, but I suspect we see most of our young players play. But it's kind of the same way a little bit in CCL. We didn't see the full starting 11 for the entire CCL. I mean, we saw different lineups. Granted, that's kind of how Wimmer approached everything, but we saw different lineups. So, but yeah, I don't think I would change it, and the reason for that is there's teams out there like LAFC that are bringing in and going and playing against some really stout competition early in the preseason, and I think my major concern there is there's plenty of opportunity for injuries, and this is a really long season, and they just lost their Diamande for I don't know how I think he's out for 6 months. And so they've already lost a player to injury that was a player they were expecting to contribute. And so, it's just I don't want to see players injured. And I think it's kind of like with the NFL. If you extend preseason beyond the format games that they already play, you're looking at potentially more injuries than you already have, which they already have, some pretty serious injuries that happen in preseason. So I don't know, but if it was on me, if I was the one making the decision, I'm certainly going to stick with what we have because I think it's sufficient enough.
Yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, because I understand that preseason is just meant to get the blood flowing and everything, and obviously like the teams that went on to play like we did last year with and the CCL, they got I think a week to 10 days head start on all the other MLS teams, and a week or 10 days might not sound like much, but obviously it did well for us last season because we had such a hot start to the season because, like you said, we were playing meaningful games way ahead of everybody else. So when it came time to for regular season to start, we were ready to go out there, and compete. And that type of stuff, those type of things should motivate the team to sort of qualify for these tournaments because of results like those. Not only because of the fact that you get to play in an international competition with rivals from your own region, but for that reason exactly that I just mentioned earlier of the fact that you get to come into preseason earlier, the team is fit sooner, and you can do really well in the beginning of your MLS season, because you already had a head start over the other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a few people say, Palomino is their player that they're going to watch. Elise and Manotas are a couple more. And I think that's understandable as well. Pat, I don't know, actually I don't think it was Pat. I think it was Ray said, this is their opportunity to audition for Europe. And I think that's absolutely true. I think the fact that both players currently are still on the Dynamo roster says that A, Tab thinks he can still get more out of him, and B, whatever offers they were getting weren't enough to really sell them on. Well, it says Ray Latigo, yo. If you want to go by a different name, you probably should change your YouTube handle, bro.
Who?
This says Ray Latigo. He goes, Ray Micho, please.
No, but well, let me ask you a question since we're on Palomino. Do you think Tab will give him minutes with the first team?
Definitely in preseason. I think it all depends on Palomino and where he's at, right? It's tough for us to be the ones to kind of say, yeah, you should definitely play this player or not play this player. I think it's only fair to let Tab make the decision and trust that Tab's going to make the right decision for the player and for the team. But if it were up to me, based on what I've seen of him so far, which isn't a whole lot, but based on what I've seen of him so far, I think he's ready. And I think that, maybe I kind of said this earlier, or not earlier on this show, but a different episode, but maybe you don't start him now. Maybe you don't even play him as a sub for the first maybe few matches of the season, but you go ahead and let him start with RGV for the first couple of months of the season. And then as the summer months start to get close, you go ahead and call him up, maybe in early May or even late April. You give him a couple of matches as a sub coming off the bench, and then you go ahead and give him the starting role. And you let him be that spark that has been missed, desperately needed by the Dynamo every season, it feels like, for the last 4 or 5 seasons without fail. We always get to the summer months, and it's like the team just kind of wilts because it's just so tough. And really, it's even tougher for the Dynamo because traditionally the Dynamo tend to play a lot of away matches during the summer months because MLS doesn't want a lot of teams to be playing in the level of heat and humidity that the Dynamo have here in Houston during those really deep summer months, like basically late June through really late August.
That's our home field advantage, man. I mean, I love being out there sweating a gallon of sweat every day.
If you're only sweating a gallon of sweat, you're still doing it wrong. And it's got like 10 gallons of sweat, man. It's hot.
Well, I mean, I try to stay in the shaded area, but we'll see. But no, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I mean, the thing with Palomino, like I said, it just depends, and that's why I think like these matches against RGV and stuff like that, it's cool. Obviously to unify the whole front, the whole club and everything. But yeah, I'm really interested to see. I don't understand the fact that that they don't stream these preseason matches. I know that they're small little things, whatever, but still that way it gives some video to check out to see how a guy like Palomino's doing obviously out there and like Danny Rios and all that stuff. Because from my standpoint, from obviously it's like if this kid's balling out of control, if he's doing really, really well, and obviously I'm not sure what Tab Ramos is personally looking to see out of him that gives him the green light to say, you know what, this kid's gonna stay up with the first team. Because you can send him to RGV for a month or so, he can go down there and play. Obviously he'd be starting and all that stuff, but that's like I said, like we said prior shows and stuff like that. When you go to RGV, sometimes even though it's a different thing with Tab, you're still going to RGV. You're still not being seen by the coach. So, and obviously with the whole I think Palomino has some high expectations that he wants to keep him close. So I don't know if the RGV thing might be in the cards. It might be like I said, it all depends on how his preseason goes. So that's why I'm interested to see these streams during the Tucson tourney to see how he's actually playing, how he's meshing, even if it is with the B-side squad, because if he comes in and let's say he clicks with Christian Ramirez or whatever, then hey, you bring in Christian Ramirez in the last 30 and you bring in Palomino in the last 15 minutes of the game, and because they've played together so much, because they're the B team, they can be the spark off the bench, and during those games and in the hot summer months when everybody else is sweating and tired and legs are giving out and cramps are everywhere, So we'll see. I'm really intrigued to see what Palomino looks like.
And for all we know, he comes out there in preseason and he just goes off and he carries himself well and he hooks it. If he links up well with players like Elise and Manotas and Ramirez and Quintero and Memo, if he links up with the attackers and does it well and does it comfortably and looks like he belongs out there, I have zero doubt that Tab would be hesitant to say, you know what, we're going to hand you the starting spot and we're going to kind of rotate everybody around you instead of, bringing you in slow. We're just going to go ahead and throw you out there and let you learn on the fly. And, Tab's the kind of coach, from what I understand, Tab is the kind of coach that he's comfortable coaching a player up while the player is already playing. An example of that is you look at players like Weston McKinney and Josh Sargent and other players that are attackers that came up through the United States youth national teams that, they were decent, very young, decent players, but they weren't great players, and he helped turn them into even better players. And I, as you are well aware, my top pick has always been, or has been at least for the last few seasons, Tab Ramos. And so seeing the Dynamo land him was amazing, but knowing that he is the type of coach that's able to develop players and is comfortable bringing players in and just letting them go, that's what I want. That's what I've asked for. I feel like with Wilmer and Coyle and Wade Barrett and Davey Arnaud, there was this hesitation to play the younger players because, my job's on the line, or, hey, I'm not certain how they're going to perform, whatever it may have been. And the fact is, you never really know until you play those players. And it very well may be that one of those players may have been the player that would have saved your job. So I don't know. It's just, it's kind of my thoughts.
I mean, and the thing about this that's different from those other situations with those previous coaches is that, this is the beginning of the season. So, I mean, if you let him out there and he, doesn't fly, he falls or whatever first, it's okay. It happens. Not everybody, flies right off the bat, but the thing about it is, that you have a squad that has a lot of continuity and have played with each other. So even if you do put a player like Palomino in there, you have players around him that have been playing together that can kind of hide a few of his flaws, because obviously it's his first professional game playing. So, and it might give him a couple minutes to get accustomed to the flow of the game and what they're trying to do and, where he needs to be positioned at and all that stuff. But after that, I mean, after all the jitters are gone and all that good stuff, I mean, who knows? Like I said, he might fly high. And for our sake, I mean, I'm hoping he does, because, it was highly advertised how we failed to do right by this kid last season. And then obviously with the signing of Tab, and I honestly think that that's the only reason that he is with the Dinos, because we signed Tab Ramos, and his connection with him, obviously with the United States youth national team, brought him back to the Dynamo. And, I'm hoping that the Dynamo reap those benefits with the fact that, they hired a coach like Ramos and he's obviously going to give him the opportunity to play with the first team.
Well, and, I mentioned Lucatero earlier. Lucatero was a player who was a homegrown signing who spent a year and a little bit with RGV and then ended up moving on to Necaxa in Liga MX. And that is what excites me, though, about seeing Lucatero with RGV right now, is the fact that that's a player who had basically written off the Dynamo system entirely. That's a player that said, you know what, they've kept me in a position.
Right by him.
Huh?
They didn't do right by him. They didn't put him in a position to.
They didn't. They didn't, and I chalk a lot of that up to frankly, to Wilmer, and how Wilmer kind of handled things. And if Tab, and I have to say if, but I kind of feel like it's almost a given at this point. But if Tab is that type of coach that's comfortable bringing those types of players and letting them play, and just understanding that players are going to struggle no matter how long you hold them from not starting. They're still going to struggle in their first few starts. Maybe they're going to light it up in their first few starts, but they're going to struggle at some point. You have to be a coach that's got enough confidence in your coaching ability to know that you can pull them out of the struggle and help them find that form again. And if Lucatero sees that in the system and knows that Tab Ramos is the type of coach he wants to play for, and he played for him a few matches with the youth national teams. Marcelo Palomino, the reason he ended up signing here was Tab. And there are other players coming up through the academy still that are pretty solid talents that are going to be able to transition to MLS play, or at least transition to upper USL, lower MLS play. And give us an opportunity to see and reap the rewards of that academy system that's been working really hard and really been grooming and growing these players. And again, it only takes one or two of those players to start, an Eric McHugh, a Marcelo Palomino, a Memo Rodriguez, to kind of just open that door so that your younger players that are already in the system, or players that are kind of, right now they're on the edge going, well, do I go with the FC Dallas system because they're more successful, or do I stick with the Houston Dynamo system because now they're starting to show that they're getting better? You make that decision harder. You make that decision work in your favor because you're the local team. You're the one that the player's already close to, and you have the opportunity to continue to expand and grow from that. And so it's kind of a snowball effect. It's a cycle that if you start succeeding at the cycle, anywhere you start succeeding in that cycle, it improves the cycle overall, and it continues to improve. And when you start to struggle with that cycle, you struggle overall, and it just continues to be a downward cycle spiral instead of moving the right direction. So it started really, in my opinion, with bringing Paul Holliker in, and then bringing in a guy like Tom Byer to talk about soccer and the starting culture, a culture of development, even at the very youngest of ages, for kids here in Houston. And then expanding that out and understanding how to kind of grow that beyond just the academy system, and understanding that it's not just the academy system that has to succeed. It's the city, the city and the region in terms of soccer. It has to succeed. It has to get better. It has to improve. And yes, we've had players that have come out of this area that have been decent players, but there are players that have left this area to go find other opportunities because they didn't get what they needed, and turned out to be decent enough players that we missed out on opportunities. So, I know that's a long-winded way to say this, but it starts with the academy. It ends with it doesn't end with the academy. It starts with the academy, but it's grown beyond the academy, and we're starting to kind of see those benefits even now. And we're only really 2.5 years into his tenure, and I'm excited to see, with the addition of Tab Ramos, what that really means for this team. And we're not going to see the big rewards this season necessarily, just in terms of additional players coming in. But even if Marcelo Palomino is the only homegrown, this year, I'm okay with that, because he's, he can be that good of a player.
Impress me if somehow Tab can bring back Wilmer Cabrera Jr.
Why? He wasn't that great of a player. He was decent, just not great.
I mean, who knows? I mean, with a little bit of coaching, who knows?
You're not wrong, but he's playing at Butler apparently, or something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, the change of culture, especially with the academy and the developmental aspect of it. I mean, it's just complete 360 from 6 years ago. So I mean, and it's one of those things where I think we'll see a lot more players stay and try to fight for their way to this first team. And I think it's going to benefit the Dynamo at the end, obviously, because hopefully they'll have an abundance of homegrown players, and then hopefully we'll see one of these homegrown players, get some kind of attraction from European clubs. The way kind of like Alfonso Davies did with Vancouver, and the kid from the FC Dallas, Richards, how he went to Bayern Munich as well. So we'll see. I mean, nothing but good can happen when you lay your foundation down right and your academy is doing what it's supposed to do.
But to piggyback on that, there's an important piece of that puzzle that I hope the Dynamo are not too reticent about, which is you have the opportunity for a player like a Palomino, etc., where if you develop them well and you develop them properly, you're only going to have them for 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons, and then you really should be looking to sell them on and make a substantial profit on that sale, because guess what? You didn't pay anything for them really, other than a little bit of time they spent in your academy. So I hope to see that the Dynamo aren't hesitant to sell some of these players on that they're developing, because it's no mystery that they could certainly use the additional funds.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I hope so too. To piggyback off what you're saying, that they're not scared, because I mean, obviously, it would be nice to see these talents, especially if they're being recognized by clubs globally, play in the Dynamo orange. But I mean, if they get picked up beforehand, and let's say a club like I don't know, like a Sevilla or like a Leicester City comes in and says, you know what, we're trying to pick up this kid, let sell him to us, and it's great business, obviously, and then maybe you put clauses in those type of things. Maybe you get a little bit of a loan deal, to continue his progress, or maybe you get a buyback clause or something, or obviously a sell on clause or something like that, depending on what happens or depending on what type of deal you're trying to negotiate with the team. But yeah, man, it's a lot of opportunities, especially like when you have a good, stable, well functioned youth academy. There's endless opportunities and endless things that can happen, whether financially or growing players or just significantly upgrading your team overnight because you have those players available to you from your own backyard.
And I like what Micho says. Houston's a gold mine of talent that has yet to be taken advantage of. I mean, I think we're starting to take advantage of it a little bit, but it's also one of those things when you're looking at the academy stuff. And yes, I'm going to come back to that, but when you're looking at the academy stuff, it's not an overnight change. It's not something that you can just fix in half a season or one season. It's something that, frankly, it takes 3, 4, 5 seasons to really kind of right that ship. And you have to remember, this has been going on this way for over 10 years. And we've been struggling for over 10 years with this particular area of development. And, in the early years, it was not a big deal to struggle developing players because we had a deep enough, reserve roster and that sort of thing to kind of supplement. But we're to the point where we're at that point where the Astros were, a few seasons, I would say 2013, 2014, 2015, where they were frankly the bottom of the barrel in terms of talent available, not only in their senior team but across their farm system. We were there just 2 seasons, 3 seasons ago. We had some talent, very little, but even that talent was basically sent away elsewhere because they didn't even want to play in the system anymore. And so now with a guy like Tab, with guys like Paul Holliker and the various individuals that he's brought in to help right the ship of the academy, there's just a huge opportunity there, and that level of win there, it does transition and it does equal success on the Dynamo level at the senior roster. So it's not enough to be successful with just the academy, and they are becoming successful with the academy. It's we need to see that transition as well, and I think that's the point that we're at, where we see that transition kind of happening, and Palomino, I think, is really truly kind of the first one of those players that has the possibility to transition quickly, whereas you have kind of an Eric McHugh who's probably going to take another season or so before he's really ready to be a starter CB for this team.
Yeah, and just to quote what George is saying on the chat, he says Marcelo in Europe, and I can totally agree with that. Obviously, with the connections that he had, I mean, he was training in Portugal and I think in England as well, or Spain as well. So I mean, he has those connections, and obviously those sorry, those scouts at those teams and those leagues obviously are gonna keep tabs on him, and make sure and see how he's progressing, is developing, throughout the years, because he's young, he's 18 years old, he has plenty of time. You also got to think about it. Not everybody's Mbappe and comes out on the world stage as a teenager and just takes over the game. He's that rare exception. But Marcelo's 18, he's obviously trained with big clubs like Porto and, like I said, a couple teams in La Liga. So those scouts are going to keep tabs on him, and they know that he's going to be playing professional soccer this season, and especially in an up and coming league like MLS. So they're going to keep tabs on him, and I won't be surprised if one of those clubs a year or two down the road offer him money to buy him, and that's what you want. The same thing with the goalkeeper that we just drafted. I mean, that kid's out there and on trial in the English Premier League. Now he might not make a team, or he might not make a reserve team or whatever, but he comes back with that experience, and those scouts are obviously going to still keep tabs on him, because one thing that the United States does produce is goalkeepers, and obviously they want another great goalkeeper, and especially if they can find somebody on the cheap, because the goalkeeping price is going up as of late, and the world and world soccer. So it's one of those things where if you can find a goalkeeper cheap, that can be between those sticks for a couple for 5-6 years, and you didn't pay that much for him. Teams are always looking for a bargain. Not even it doesn't matter how valuable your team is in the global stage. Anytime you can get a value, you're for it.
Yeah, Micho asked or says, and then follows up with a question. A lot of the kids I work with have no funds, transportation to be a part of academies. Is that being addressed? Those are usually the most talented kids. It's not, and I think Micho, you'll probably agree with this when I say it this way. It's not that they're necessarily the most talented kids. It's they're the ones that have the most. They're the ones that are going to put the most into it. They're the ones that are going to put the most effort into being successful and succeeding at that level. At the young youth level.
It's a life choice.
It is a life. They understand that it's an opportunity to improve their situation. A lot of times, a lot of their situation, and a lot of the kids out there that aren't in those situations that are their parents have the funds to pay for them to travel. I'm going to call it ECNL right now. Kids that are in ECNL, and listen, there are kids in those systems that are extremely talented players, but they're never going to make it to the pro level because they just don't have the drive and determination to be the best. They have the drive and determination to be good enough to get to college and earn a college scholarship, but they don't actually want to be an MLS player. They want to be a guy who goes out and parties after every match. They want to be a guy that goes out there and lives on mommy and daddy's trust funds, so to speak. Go ahead.
You saw over Twitter and over the Dynamo page the last the last month about the kid who tragically lost his father, I believe. And they raised funds for that kid because he wants to keep going with the academy, and from the transcripts that I've read in the articles that I've seen, the kid seems determined to obviously turn this horrific tragedy that him and his family are going through right now into something positive. And if that's with the Dynamo, that's great. Or whoever he ends up with, I hope that he comes out of it, great and a good person, all that, but on top of that, a great soccer player in the future, and all that stuff where he can take care of his family and do good by them for all the sacrifice and all the stuff that they've done for him.
Well, and I wanted to answer the question, Micho, just so you know, the Dynamo do have a set number of scholarships to the academy that they do offer to specific players from their. There's usually camps that they hold that they look at kids in various places there, but they do have scouts that go out to various matches and take notes and look at local talent. I don't know how you maybe get some of the kids that of in on the into the periphery of the Dynamo, so to speak, within their purview, but. I would say if nothing else, just reach out to Dynamo Academy on Twitter, at Dynamo Academy, I think is exactly what it is. And just say, hey, I coach a team out here and, these kids are in a position where, some of them have, immense talent and immense drive to be successful, but their parents don't necessarily have the funds or transportation to get out to a Dynamo camp and see what they can do. I mean, you never know. Sometimes it just takes reaching out to entities like that and just say, hey, this is the situation. What can we do to make it better? And, hey, maybe you're the linchpin that the Dynamo need to reach into that, that community and start growing that, soccer in that community as far as the Dynamo way.
What I've seen with, obviously because my nephews, he plays soccer. They have affiliations with different clubs throughout the city, that maybe there's a club close to those kids that you work with or that live in whatever area you're speaking of that is affiliated with the Dynamo. I know they have a club, let me look it up real quick, but yeah, they have a club that they do that they get a lot of their players from, that basically kind of teaches them the fundamentals, and then that club tells them, hey, you need to look at these kids, and then the Dynamo coaches will go out there and look at these kids, and then they'll decide whether or not they move them on to an actual Dynamo Academy team and all that stuff. But for sure, man, there's a lot of affiliations out there. That's one of the good things about Paul when he came in. Like, he went out there and met with these coaches of these club teams, these youth club teams, and they wanted to get a connection with the city. You know, obviously the big club here is the Dynamo, and it should be a Houston kid's not to say dream, per se dream to play for the Dynamo. I mean, that's not something that should be looked at as frowned upon. It's a professional soccer team in a league that's going up. I mean, think about it. A kid right now, 7 years old, 10 years from now, who knows where MLS is going to be 10 years from now? MLS can be one of those top 10 leagues in the world 10 years from now if it's not already. Obviously, with all the name brand players that we're getting, with all the money that's getting influxed to the league and all the investments throughout the whole country, it's not nowhere near a distant dream that a homegrown kid from Houston or the surrounding area in Houston can one day grow up and play professionally for his hometown team, the Houston Dynamo.
I agree. I mean, it's not. I think we're at the precipice of seeing that happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, truthfully, and it's not going to necessarily be a player that's going to be a superstar player on those teams. But I think there's a Stuart Holden type of player that's here in Houston that's capable, whatever age they may be right now, but that's capable. Go ahead.
No, I have a friend whose son plays for the U16s up to the U19s. He's between that level right now. I'm gonna shout him out, Daniel Flores. Um, he plays with the Dynamo Academy right now. And man, they speak so highly of him. And when you go watch him play, that kid he has so much skills. And even when he plays with us, us when I play with his father and we go play, pickup games, like that kid is just running circles around us. But yeah, I mean, I would be happy to see him in the next 3 to 4 years, wearing that orange and us in the supporters section cheering him on. That would be amazing.
That would, I'll be honest, that would be pretty sweet. That would be pretty freaking sweet. The thing is, and I think you and I both feel this way, but we could talk for hours about the Dynamo Academy reaching kids in this city, in this region, where the talent is in this city region. Are the Dynamo in terms of the academy, are they really reaching deep enough into those places? And I think there's a lot to be said for that stuff. But I also think that you and I, as much as we can create the conversation around it, it takes guys like Micho and others that are out there that are willing to be coaches, willing to dive in and get down there. And do it, because it's easy for us to say, well, yeah, they should do this, they should do that, they should be here, they should be there. But, personnel is limited. Funds are limited. It's not like they have, unlimited funding to just throw at these players and send scouts around the entire city. I mean, Houston's a massive city. There's a reason we have as many people as we have. And so it really is. It's a situation where it's on the community as much as it is on the Dynamo and the academy to find these players. Like I was saying to Micho, if there's a situation where you have talented players that you think might be good enough, then find a way to connect with the Dynamo. I am 100% certain that they would at least engage a conversation about how to maybe about having. I mean, they have their discovery days that they do, I think is what they call them, where they basically open up the academy option for anybody who can make it out. And I know they do them in certain places, but maybe just by engaging the Dynamo and saying, hey, there's talent out in this area of Houston, maybe they'd be willing to run one of those out there, and at least if nothing else, give your kids an opportunity to maybe get a chance.
If you go to the Houston Dynamo Academy page, I mean, there's a link there where you can sign up, and I think they sent you like emails and newsletters of all the upcoming, trials and where they're gonna scrimmage and where they're gonna play games, or where they're gonna try to look for talent, or what area they're gonna be in for that week or whatever. So I mean, and some of that stuff is free. Obviously for the more advanced stuff, it costs a little money, but some of you'd be surprised how many of those programs and training are free, and you can just go out there and I'm Paul or neither or one of the Dynamo Academy coaches, they're not scared to go walk up to one of those kids and be like, "Hey, take them to the side one-on-one and tell them, hey, try do this and let's see how that goes." Like I seen them firsthand because, like I said, when I started with my nephew a couple years back, you know, I would see it for myself. You know, I watch my nephew play in a little 5-on-5, and they pull him to the side and, hey, do this or do that, or other kids, they take them to the side, hey, try this, or why did you do this? It's great. It's great the way that they're hands on and how the academy has approached these last couple of months. Well, year and a half now, I guess, almost 2 years.
And that's part of coaching too, right? Is understanding that coaching is not just making sure players are running specific drills or that you've trained them in a specific way, but it's also understanding that your position as a coach is to coach. Your position as a coach is to teach. Your position as a coach is to mentor and to train. I mean, it's all of those things. It's not just one thing or another thing. And I think at times, there are coaches out there that they're content to just be kind of a game day coach or a game day and practice day coach, and then the rest of the week that it's, hey, the players are the players, and whatever they do is their business. But successful players in MLS and successful players in soccer, they are not just game day players. Trust me when I say they are. It is a professional lifestyle. You have to be a professional to succeed, and I guarantee you, players like Christian Lucatero, Kubo Torres, and I think we'll see it with Chicharito. They understand. They've had to learn that you can't just be lazy about practice, be lazy about days off. You have to really put in the effort. Almost 24/7. Mito says, "Oh, for sure, our whole program is to motivate at-risk students more than anything," and I think that's amazing, and definitely not an easy place to be. At-risk kids for sure. But on the flip side, when you see one of them succeed or you see one of them make it, that for those out there that are like, well, why would I get involved with that? There's a lot of failure. I mean, the reality is it only takes one success and then you're hooked.
Yeah, for sure. Like just like I mentioned earlier with my friend's son who's an academy man. I mean, there's a whole group of us. There's a whole crew of us that know this kid, that's seen this kid grow up. So if he makes it, man, trust us. Like we'll all be happy. We'll all have that proud papa feeling, I guess. Because we know this kid since he was little. So, but moving on, man, from the academy, I think we touched enough bases on that. The big news this week was
o'clock yet. We got 12 more minutes of okay. No, I'm just kidding.
The big news this week was one of our Dynamo legends came back and signed a one-day contract with us. Ricardo Clark, speaking of the academy, who's coaching in the academy currently with the Dynamo. He came back, signed a one-day contract with us to retire a Dynamo. Sean, what is your fondest memory of Ricardo Clark?
I'm typing something. Give me just a second. Tell us your fondest memory instead.
Well, it's funny. So when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about on the show this week, obviously when the news popped up that Ricardo Clark was going to come back and sign a one-day contract to retire a Dynamo, obviously I've watched Ricardo Clark, obviously during his first stint. I was happy when he went off to the Bundesliga and actually did really well over there for Frankfurt. And when he was with the United States men's national team for I want to say the 2010 squad, or was it 14? I can't remember.
It was 10.
It was 10. Okay, yeah. So for the 2010 squad, which is the squad that did really well, that went to the round of 16, I think, right? When they had that goal against Algeria that pushed them through. But yeah, it was great to see him, go back and come back, obviously, and now being involved with the academy as well. And I like the fact that the Dynamo are doing more of this, where they're bringing back their older players, obviously, from that time where that championship or bust was basically the banter around here, where we were one of the top teams in the league, and we need to have that same passion and keep that same passion in the club. So going back to one of the fondest memories. So I was watching a YouTube video of him because I was like, man, I've seen Ricardo Clark do so many things, but one of the things that obviously caught my eye when I was watching this YouTube video of Ricardo Clark was how many goals he scored outside the box. Just bombs, man. And obviously, here in Houston, we know Adam Moffett as that guy who just hit it from 30 yards out and just blasted in. But man, Ricardo Clark has some beauties, man. He has. I saw these two. These two most notable ones that stood out to me from that video was one against obviously FC Frisco. He just slammed it, man, and it had to be a good 20-25 yards out. And then one against Montreal that he just shook a player, the ball bounced, and it bounced back his way, and he just first touch banged it out 20 yards out. And it was such a beauty, man. I know a lot of people's fondest memory was when he didn't kick a ball, he kicked a player. Carlos Ruiz. Yeah, el pescadito.
Yeah,
For
the
those
fish.
who know, yeah, the little fish.
It's still a fish.
So-
Don't matter if it's little, it's still a fish.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously creating to the hype of the Texas Derby and all that good stuff. But yeah, those two goals, man, they were beauties, man, and it just reminded me of what the present day Dynamo team kind of lacks, man. Because I was watching those goals, I was like, it wasn't a rare thing to see back in the good old days, seeing goals being scored from 20-25 yards out because you had players like Moffett and Clark who weren't scared to take the shot.
Yeah, back then there was a difference in terms of the spine, right? We spent a lot of our talent, our talent, if you will, I guess is the best way to put it, on the spine of the team. I mean, we had extremely solid center backs. We had really solid, central midfielders and defensive midfielders and attacking midfielders. We had solid central forwards, and kind of everything else just kind of shaped up around that. And we played a specific way that really enabled those players to kind of shine. You had players like Jeff Cameron that played at multiple positions in the center and outside. You had players like Bobby Boswell that played, center back, Brian Ching that played forward, Dwayne De Rosario who played kind of attacking mid, Stuart Holden who played attacking mid / box-to-box mid, Rico who played box-to-box mid, things like that. Players like that that were they were workhorses. Every one of them were workhorses, and it was a mentality when you came to the Dynamo. You were expected to be a workhorse. You were expected to put in the effort and the time and the energy, and you were expected to play at a high level, match in and match out. And if you didn't, you heard it from players like Eddie Robinson and other players that were considered the veterans.
There was accountability back then, and not to say that there isn't any now, but I think everybody held each other to such a high standard because they came in here and just blew the top off and won those championships early, and obviously even going back to the finals back-to-back years, all that good stuff. There was accountability, there was leadership all around. Everybody was a leader, to be honest. You could put the captain's armband on anybody during that time period. But let me give you some I'm the stat guy, I'm the numbers guy. So let me give you some
they
numbers.
certainly ain't me.
Let me give you some numbers to solidify why Rico's for true in fact a Dynamo legend. So he's second all time behind Brad Davis, obviously, in games played, games started. Games played 304. He's seventh all time in goals in Dynamo history with 31. Sixth all time in assists with 24. He is the all time category though. Do you guess, Sean?
Ask your question again. I'm sorry.
He is the all time leader in Dynamo history in one category. Do you care to guess?
Yellow cards.
Ding ding. Yep, he is in fact the leader.
Don't challenge me, Mark. I got you, son.
No, so he is in fact the which is something. Yellow cards can be can be taken either way. Obviously they're needed because sometimes they're tactical fouls and whatever. And Rico, he was a general in that field. He knew what needed to be done. And if he needed to put somebody on their ass, he put them on their ass. It's just it needed to be done. he went out there and fought like you said earlier. He was basically the spine of the team. He was out there ready to go to war for. He is one of those players that you want on your team because he plays for the crest and the name in front of the shirt, not the one in the back.
It's funny, right? My fondest memory or my best memory of Rico has nothing to do with scoring a goal, nothing to do with a epic moment. It was the end of a match. I don't even remember what the scoreline was because, frankly, it didn't matter. But Rico was coming off the pitch and he was walking to the tunnel, and the dude was just literally drenched in sweat. I mean, he was dripping sweat. This guy, he just played so hard, and that just spoke to everything that Rico was about, which was laying it all on the pitch and leaving it all on the field. And I mean, it was just absolutely nuts to see just how much the guy was like. He literally just gave it all on the pitch, and yet he would still high five fans and shake player hands or fan hands and things like that. Autographs, all that. And there's a reason that he's a beloved Dynamo player, because he was that type of player who would put everything on the pitch regardless of how he was feeling that day or how much he truly had to give. It's a shame that he couldn't have spent longer with the Dynamo. That second time around, I wish they would have kept him around, because we certainly could have used a leader during those days on the pitch for sure, and especially in that position. But at the same time, he was getting older, and he wasn't going to be a full-time starter. So,
obviously seeing Rico back and being acknowledged as a Dynamo legend, it kind of closes the book on that chapter of the Dynamo history, because he's kind of the last of that, those players from that time period. I think obviously the one player that we think is the next Dynamo legend to be, taken like that is Boniek, but Boniek kind of came in at the tail end of that, and kind of was the beginning of the new book that we're in now.
I would say kind of the end of the Rico era was the beginning of the Garrido era, Luis Garrido, and then that transitioned into the Boni era. I kind of feel like, because before that, Boni played kind of up, and then
well, I'm speaking in terms of just overall Dynamo legend, not.
Oh, that's totally
different.
Different.
Not the specific position or nothing like that. But yeah, Boniek came in at he was in that second trip to the MLS final where they lost to LA Galaxy, but and then that kind of he's been our heart ever since then, because I mean, obviously that guy, he's 35, 36, still playing hard out there, and it kind of comes to show like how far we've come as a club, from that time period. I mean, and obviously this era of Dynamo history hasn't been very good to us, except for a couple bright spots here and there, with obviously the US Open Cup and the unforeseen Western Conference appearance in 2017, but it's something that us as fans and supporters of the Dynamo should be proud of, to see those players, especially around the community, because I think I see Brian Ching I see Brian Ching a lot, to be honest, around the community. Obviously, the way Stuart Holden's been out there, especially in national media. Obviously Eddie Robinson with the Dynamo broadcast, and obviously now he's a Dash assistant. I think still Bobby Broswell and all that stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, Ricardo Clark coming back and now being an academy coach. It's great because Rico has that knowledge of how it is to be a grinder, and to play overseas in a bigger league like the Bundesliga and do well in the Bundesliga, and also how to make it to the national team and do well for the national team. Because I mean, Rico had that period, man. I'm telling you, he had that period once he went to the Bundesliga and he joined with the United States national team, where he was getting called up on a consistent basis, where he was a starter, man. He was if he wasn't a starter, he was one of the first ones off the bench. And that's because just of his tenacity and the way he just played and the way he hustled out there. I mean, like he's just that player that you want on your squad.
Oh yeah, for sure. Pat says first time I met Ching, he biked up to our tailgate while drinking a sangria. As he loves Houston, and Stu flying in with his kid just to help open free soccer fields. I mean, yeah, it's look. There was a different level of commitment to the brand, commitment to you mentioned it, the crest, a commitment to the city for those early Dynamo players, and really I feel like it was the Dominic Kinnear era. When Dominic Kinnear left, this team changed identities dramatically and very quickly, and it wasn't just to play on the pitch, but it's also been we've lacked leadership since Dominic Kinnear left, and I have to wonder if some of that is tied to the fact that Dominic Kinnear was just that good at finding leaders in players that other teams couldn't find leaders in.
I think to answer your question, it's one of two things. Obviously, because I think Dominic, for the time and the era of MLS soccer that he was in, he was perfect. And obviously we had the perfect batch of players because of the amount of success we had during that those first 7-8 years. I mean, it was top notch soccer for that level and that level at that time period. Obviously with the transitions, and how MLS rapidly, I mean, because let's not kid ourselves, MLS is growing at a rapid pace, and it's one of those things where I think maybe the Dynamo were too complacent, at that time, because they were one of the top dogs during that area during that time period when MLS was starting to grow rapidly, and they were like, you know what, man, we don't need the Beckhams or the Terry Henrys or the Rafa Marquezes. I mean, we're making the playoffs, we're beating these teams, and we're making it to finals. While these teams sign big names, they can't even make it to the playoffs, or they're having issues, here and there, and which I understand. When you're the top dog, you have a right to be to a certain level of complacency. But I think for the Dynamo, I think they took it too long, and that's where when it came time to kind of get out of the Dominic Kinnear era, we fell so far behind because so many teams were fighting and gouging to get to the next level, to that MLS 2.0 or 3.0, how whatever 3.0 it was at that time period, that when it came time for us to change and adapt to that, obviously we thought we had the right person in mind to take us to that next level, or in Coil, because coach Bolton, all this great resume of you know finding talented players for nothing and building them up, and obviously that didn't work, and then the whole thing with Wade didn't work, and the Wilmer thing had hits good moments. We can't deny that, and obviously it came down crashing pretty fast. But hopefully from here on out, we can keep the progression going upwards.
And I don't think there's any reason to believe we can't. I mean, I think that's one of the things, though, that I take away from that kind of Rico era. And I feel like there were kind of two Rico eras, right? There was the part before he left for Europe, and then the part when he came back after Europe. And kind of came back with, I think, a lot of fan expectation of being the savior of the Dynamo. And I frankly never expected him to be that player. I knew him coming back. He was, at that point, I want to say he was 27, 28 coming back. I mean, he was already, he technically that's your prime as a soccer player, technically. But, he was coming back from Europe after a season where he struggled and had injuries. Go ahead, Mark.
No, yeah, I never thought of that. One, because obviously the position he plays, he can't dictate the game like a forward, or someone who scores goals or who assists goals like that, right? So I never thought of him as coming back as a savior. I was thinking that he was going to be one of those pieces that they were going to get back, to kind of solidify the team, to and then go sign some other people, but obviously that didn't happen too much that season, except for I think that was the season that Kubo came in. Obviously they invested a lot in Kubo, and we saw how that went under the Coil era. But but yeah, man, I mean, I was happy that they brought Rico back after his stint in the Bundesliga. I think if it weren't for his injuries and the lack of playing time he had that last season, obviously due to injuries, I think he would have still been there. If not another league in Europe. But stuff happens, but he made the best of it. He came over here and he played like he was playing in the Bundesliga. I mean, that guy, like I said, regardless of the match, regardless of what kind of match it was, he was out there playing and he played his heart out.
Yeah, like I said, I mean that is the epitome of what Rico was. He was that player that was always going to leave it all on the pitch, and for that, I look, if we had 23 players, that were that way, were built to be those types of players, I think this team would be successful. I mean, period. And it's a shame that we've seen the team change over the last few seasons, probably the last 7 seasons or so, maybe 6 seasons. But I also feel like we're at that point where maybe we're turning that corner again, and maybe starting to move in the right direction. And here's to hoping. But if it wasn't for Rico, I hate to think how bad this team would have been in his kind of later years that he was still here.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously with this announcement of Rico coming in, coming back to Dynamo, I kind of posted a question yesterday on Twitter that a couple of people answered, and it got me thinking about, Rico came back after his stint in Germany. What player would you want to come back? And I listed 4. There was other players I had in mind, but these 4, for some reason, there were those 4 that kind of they were good and they had potential to be good or even great, but just because of that time period, that Owen Coyle, Wayne Barrett era, that where it just made everybody look like crap. Honestly, they just didn't achieve the level that the Dynamo front office hoped that those players would. So if they were able to run it back and be brought back to the Dynamo, which one of those 4 players that I mentioned in the Twitter poll, and for those who didn't see it, it was Eric Kubo-Torres, Luis Garrido, Raul Rodriguez, and Giles Barnes. Which one of those 4 would you want to bring back, and why? Me personally, because of what the team needs at this moment, it would be Luis Garrido. And that's because of his toughness and his tenacity. That guy's a dog. That guy's out there hustling. He's willing. He's out there winning those 50-50 balls. And if it weren't for that horrendous leg injury when he was on with Honduras, man, dude, that injury was brutal. I mean, if you haven't seen clips of that video of him getting injured, man, that was a horrendous injury. And for him to come back from that better and stronger, honestly, that just goes to show what type of player he is, and what type of motivation that he has, self-motivation he has. Sean, what are you doing with your hands?
I'm playing with the cable down there. That's all.
That's what
What? Yes, that's what I call the cable that goes from my microphone to my computer. Yes, that's what I call it, as a cable. Look, if I, out of those 4 players, and I know somebody in particular in chat will appreciate this, I honestly, if I had to bring, if I was given the option to bring one of those 4 back, mine would honestly have to be Giles Barnes. And I don't think he got a fair shake when he was here. I think he was put in a situation where he was not really able to succeed. And I know your thought of, because I saw it on Twitter, I watched a discussion a little bit on Twitter of, well, we really don't need a player in that position right now, and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is Giles could have been a 10. He could have been a, he
Giles was a beast.
Not only was Giles a beast, but he was committed to the brand. He was committed to the crest. He cared about playing for the Dynamo. He enjoyed it, and it was it was the regime at the time that sent him away. It had nothing to do with Giles not wanting to be here, and frankly, he would have came back given the opportunity.
And he was a captain for a short time period. I mean,
he was.
And like I said, and the reason I mentioned these 4 players is because these 4 players, when they came in, we had such high expectations for these players, but it's just the unfortunate time that they came in, when the club was going through a whole turmoil, the whole change. And unfortunately for us, that change after Domball, after the Dominic Kinnear era, we just went crashing down. And unfortunately for those 4 players in particular, they weren't able to help the team get out of that hole, and because I mean, think about it, man. I mean, I know we make fun of the fact that Cuba Torres didn't score for 2 years, but dude, look. Once he had finally somebody who understood how he played, and even and we clown on Wilmer too, but Wilmer, I mean, he doesn't just score 14 goals. I mean, I know some of them were penalty kicks, but I mean, some of them were for free kicks, some of them from outside the box. I mean, Kubel has skill, had skill. I mean, he still has skill. I mean, but he had a lot of potential. I mean, he does. You don't score 15 goals in 30 games in a season just out of nowhere. You know, it's the same thing like with Mauro now. When he had his breakout season. I mean, we understand that Mauro had talent. That's why we let Kubel go because we saw that Mauro had the potential or had the higher ceiling at the time to take that next level, and we've already given Kubo 3 years, at a higher salary. So
I'm going to go back to Giles for a second because George says Giles turned into a diva, didn't like him after that, especially when he got the number 10. I disagree, George. I think there was a lot of talk about Giles turning into a diva, but I can tell you from firsthand experience, the guy was as grounded as anybody in this city, any athlete in this city, etc. I mean, the guy literally gave everything he had on that pitch, match in and match out, and he was given a bad rap because of the regime he played for, because he was playing for Owen Coyle and playing out of position consistently. I mean, the guy's level of talent and his capability were off the charts. But he was playing for a coach that, frankly, nobody enjoyed playing for, nobody wanted to play for. They kept trotting out other players and kept, resting Giles. And Giles was like, dude, I could go 90. Let me go 90 for the love of God. We would then concede a goal once Giles came off the pitch. And I think a lot of fans turned on him just because of what they were told. And it's a shame because I genuinely speaking, there was nobody on that roster that was as personable and likable as Giles. For all the diva rap that I think he got, I think a lot of that was the extent and result of, people thinking they understood, him and understood what he was dealing with, and just a perception that was generated. And it's a shame because I think he probably still would have, I think he would have stuck with the Dynamo if they would have let him. And I think he could have been a player that, frankly, could have helped a Mauro Manotas grow even faster, a player that could have helped an Elise grow even faster. Just imagine Elise having a mentor like Giles Barnes, a player that played over in England for a few seasons and had an injury, so he had to work himself back from a near career-ending injury, to get to the level that Giles got at. Imagine having that type of player to mentor, and mentor Kyoto to show you how to be a professional match in and match out, how to be a professional on and off the pitch. I mean, it pisses me off because, frankly, we had a player that could have been that team leader that players, I think, honestly would have looked up to in the long run, but we got rid of him, for next to nothing because of, A, Matt Jordan created a salary situation that wasn't going to work, and, frankly, that came from Owen Coyle insisting they do that, which was dumb. And, frankly, if I'm Giles Barnes and I'm offered that salary, I'm not turning that down.
Oh yeah. You can't blame Giles for that.
No.
I mean, look, just going on Giles again. If you also got to remember, Giles was a national team player for Jamaica, and I think he was named one of the top starters for that tournament. I forgot what year it was that where Jamaica went all the way to the final, the first of the 2 finals they made it in the Gold Cup. And dude, like when he played and he had and he was being called up for Jamaica, the Jamaican team looked totally different. That was a dangerous Jamaican team, and with literally nobodies, MLS players. Obviously now you got players like Leon Bailey and stuff like that, but this is prior to all that. That Jamaican team came out of nowhere and made it all the way to the finals and made a game against the Mexican team that year, and it was because of Barnes. Barnes was that spark that they needed and that leadership that they needed because he obviously played in the English league. He came from England. He knew how it is to to work hard and to practice and to train, and to go out there and hone your craft, and like I said, it's one of those Giles would be my second choice after Garrido, but yeah, Barnes, man, yeah, like I said, Barnes is one of those that just like, man, what could have been,
Yeah.
and
Can I add something to that real quick? So you brought up the Jamaica national team, and you brought up how well they played when he was with them, and how good that team looked, and how they took Mexico to the brink, and everything else, and made it to the final. I think what's really key there is the fact that this was a team that really shortly before Giles joined was a team that they were playing okay but not great. And I think what shows just the level of a player that Giles was. He joins that team and everybody got better. That team got immensely better when Giles joined. And look, it's a matter of having a player with that level of fire, that level of drive and determination to be the best. We talked about that with the youth and academy discussion earlier. When you have a player like that it's there, it is truly and honestly, it is their life, to be out there and play. They're going to give you everything, and Giles did. And I think a lot of people thought he was a lazy player, and I think that there's a misconception there, and there's a perception issue there, because he wasn't a lazy player. He just understood that, as a forward, you don't run you don't run up and down the pitch the whole time. You have to pick and choose your spots where you make those runs behind the defense, and not waste your energy on stupid runs that make no sense and don't really win your team a ball.
yeah, and a lot of people have a misconception of that, because I mean, first and foremost, I want to say maybe 80% of the people who say those type of things have never run on a soccer pitch, or played the game of soccer, because if you go out and you try to run all that field all the time, you're not gonna make it past 20 minutes of the game. So if you play your position, you play your position. You stay in your area with depending on what formation you're in or whatever. But aside from that, going back to the Kubo topic, Carlos said something interesting. When he came in to the Dynamo, obviously he had allegations and stuff like that. And I said I think I replied to somebody's tweet under the poll, under that thread or whatever, that brought up the same situation. I told him, look, by no means am I not discounting the fact that Kubo had a hand in his failures here in Houston, but he wasn't. But it came from both sides. It was a whole mixture of different things. Obviously he didn't come prepared the first year. The coach didn't have faith in him because he didn't come prepared the first year. And then when he finally got into shape, he had the allegations and he had other stuff in the personal areas, with I want to say it was some kind of something with a woman or something like that. And then, obviously he didn't mesh with Coyle. He wasn't scoring goals. And as anybody knows, as a forward or whatever, if you're not scoring goals, your whole attitude and your whole morale goes down and your confidence goes down like that. Forwards and strikers, forwards, specifically center forwards, are like closers in baseball. If you're not striking out people or getting people out, you'd be surprised how quickly that confidence goes and you start giving up singles, doubles, and then home runs. Same thing for a center forward. I mean, if that ball doesn't hit the back of the net at a consistent basis, people start losing confidence. And a lot of people at that time period were starting to lose a lot of confidence in Kubo, even though he was brought in. I think what they spent $6 million to get him in, and that left a bad taste in the Dynamo's front office mouth. Because think about it, imagine if Kubo would have done well, and with that $6 million, and they would have flipped him and sold him back to somewhere, for, I don't know, let's say 12 or 10 or 12 mil, whatever, But we might be talking about a whole different Dynamo front office right now, because they might be more willing to spend. But that Kubo thing left a really bad taste in their mouths. So,
and I think a lot of people tend to forget that if you're the owner and you're spending that level of money and you're going, you know what, I'm all in on this player. I'm gonna go all in on this player, and then that player turns out to be essentially a dud. What your expectation was and what you actually got were two very different things. you're going to be far less open to investing that level of money, because the fact is Brenner did not get back what he put in for Kubo
nowhere near
at all. And I'm not just talking transfer fee. I'm talking, what they concessions that they gave Kubo. And they gave Kubo so much rope, and he hung himself with it. He frankly hung himself with it. I mean, at the end, he was missing practices and missed the team bus to on an away match to get to the airport, or missed the flight to get on the plane to travel to wherever. I mean, you can't, as a professional soccer player, you can't do that. Period. And so anybody who defends Kubo and says, well, he scored 15 goals in a season, and then turns around and bashes Giles Barnes for being a prima donna, and I know that George isn't doing that, but I'm saying anybody who does that, man, y'all need to get out, because that's just it's not even fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, man. I mean, that's one of the things where I'm like, if I put myself in Brenner's shoes, obviously, if my first huge investment in a player was Kubo Torres, and I spent 6-7 mil on this guy, and the first 2 seasons I got no goals out of him. He has personal allegations of, I think, sexual assault or something like that. He's not coming into shape. He's not meshing with the players, and this is supposed to be that Mexican signing that was supposed to bring in the people. He at that time he was a fringe national team player. He was by no means a shoe-in for the national team, but he was in and out. He was riding that wave because of the success he was having at Chivas USA. And obviously he played with Chivas as well, so he had that recognition. He had that recognition. So, but for all that, and like you said, they gave him so much leeway to the point where he just hung himself with his own rope. You can't really blame an owner, especially an owner that's first coming in, and that's the first big thing that he does. Trying to, I guess, appease the fans, because for how long have we've been hearing, oh, we need a Mexican player, we need a big Mexican player of name, we need somebody to, so he said, well, shit, look, Kubo Torres, he played with Chivas, who's arguably one of the biggest team in Liga MX, top 4 at least. He's a French player on the Mexican national team. He's young, so he's French right now because there has other players in front of him. At that time, it was Chicharito Hernandez. He was just coming up. I can't think of that time period right now, but yeah, he had other players, but he was making it on the national team. He's young. He's established in MLS because he's scoring, every other game, 15 goals in 30 games. That's a really good scoring rate. So he checked off all the boxes. So he said, screw it, let's go. Let's bring him in. And they brought him in, and it was a complete dud. But I don't want to spend too much time on this Kubo thing. But there's one more player on that list that we haven't been talking about, and I want to show him some love too. Raul Rodriguez, he came in, he was supposed to be our Kiki before Kiki. What do you think about Raul?
I thought he got an unfair shake under Coyle and in the early Wilmer years as well. I just don't think he ever was in a position to succeed here, and it's a shame, because I feel like a lot of the center backs that we brought in could have been decent center backs, but we kept either pairing them with mid-tier guys or lower-tier guys, or we kept pushing them. Pushing defensive midfielders that were no good in front of them. And you just can't do that. That's not how you're successful. Again, you really, if you want to be successful in MLS, you have to have a decent spine. And I just feel like we lost sight of how to play soccer. And even from a fundamental standpoint, it felt like we were kind of short. And coaching is a thing, and it it doesn't matter how good a player is, coaching is still going to have an effect. And I think we saw it, all 4 of those players, I think really, but I think Raul Rodriguez got a very unfair shake overall. I would have loved to have seen him come back.
I mean, could you think, imagine pairing, Raul and I think Raul came to us at 28. Imagine him being paired up to Kiki right now. I mean, that would be one hell of a spine.
I mean, I would have
I
even
mean,
taken like a Raul Rodriguez next to next to Alejandro Fuenmayor. I mean, that's a player that could have benefited greatly from a player like a Raul Rodriguez with a lot to teach him. And I just that's my struggle, right? Is as fans we see these things, and bring back Andrew Luck. I mean Oliver. Uh, we look at these things and we see them and we struggle, and we're frustrated at them, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from in general. But there are those out there that like to take the struggle to the next level, and there's no place for that. There's really not.
I mean, and that's where I go to where, like, people always getting frustrated at the fact that they're not bringing in players. I mean, but if you look at the track record, they've brought in great players. I mean, not great players, but I mean really good players. So I mean, whoever is doing the scouting at that time and even now, I mean, they've brought in good players. It's just that we haven't had a complete team. We've had a good set of individuals, but we haven't had a complete team in a while. And hopefully, this season is a change to that, and it's more team oriented, not just individual goals or individual achievements. And because I mean, I can go down a list of players during that era that just were unfortunate to be a Dynamo during that time period. I mean, you think of players like Alex Lopez. You think of players like another Spaniard, August. Just players like that. You can go down the list of players that were talented players who had played in big leagues. Because I mean, and we're just given the short stick, man. Because unfortunately, during that time period, the Dynamo were in a change, and unfortunately for us at that time period, we weren't going in the right direction.
I I flip it a little bit though, and I say that there were some of those players that were brought in, like a Rocha, a Goose.
You can't,
Huh?
you can't forget the one, the drug kingpin now, Koke.
There were other players that were brought in that at the time they had a lot of hype, just because they were players being brought in, but in general they weren't going to be top level players, and it's a struggle for me because I think there's I kind of actually agree with that a little bit. I think there's a bit of I think as fans we have to be careful too to not put too much emphasis on the quality of players that were brought in, because I do think that there was, to some extent, there was a lack of quality brought in certain positions, and
Yeah. I mean,
but on the
yeah, I
flip
agree.
side, it wouldn't have mattered if we brought in better players, because the coaching still was not there regardless, and those players in particular I think got a bad rap. But they were also players being brought in from the second and third leagues in their respective countries, or being brought in from smaller teams, whatever the case may be. And so we were trying to find the diamond in the rough, so to speak, and it just wasn't happening.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously, no team in the world hits 100% on their signings, right? But if when you take a time to sit back and reflect during that time period of the Dynamo history, because hopefully that's way back in the river view now. But you can't help to think about the players that were sacrificed during that era, because I mean, I follow soccer. I watch. For those who know me, I'll watch any soccer league game. And it's funny sometimes when a former Dynamo pops up on the screen, and and he's like, "Oh shit, yeah, hey, we had him." A prime example. I mean, a youngster we had in Argentine, a youngster we had a couple of years back, Leonel Miranda. He was killing it in the Argentine Premier League, this past season, and now I think he's with Tijuana. I think and Liga MX. If I'm not sure, I know he joined Liga MX, but yeah, man. I mean, imagine that kid if he would have been under the right guidance and under the right tutelage. If he wasn't during that Owen Coyle era, that kid would have been a beast. And you got that kid for cheap. Well, he was on loan, but I don't think the fee was anywhere near the amount that that he's worth now.
I
You
mean,
know, it have
Micho
been
did,
that first half of the lease.
yeah. Micho's question: the quality coming in was at a lower tier than the quality coming into MLS now. I mean, it was. I think that some of the players that Dynamo brought in, during those seasons, especially the super lean seasons, I think it was a lower quality than what we're seeing now. I mean, you look at a player like Kiki, he at least has, national team experience. You look at a player like Marco Maric, he's had youth national team experience. You look at your players that have been brought in, they've either had youth national team experience or they're players that are at least reasonably recognizable. Yes, we're still looking for some of those diamonds in the rough that need, training and need development, but that's the type of team we're going to be. I think the difference back then was we were kind of sold on this idea that we weren't that kind of team back then. We were just coming out of the Dom era, and we were expecting to kind of be the team that, the players we're bringing in are good enough to not only be starters, but they're good enough to be starters on kind of any team across MLS. And so I just don't, I struggle with it, right? Because I think there's two sides of that coin, and I think sometimes we get sentimental and we look at some of these players and I've even seen the names kind of scroll across the screen and Akin Bailly, and I'm thinking of Rashid Olabi'i,
Nguyen?
huh?
Joseph
Nguyen. Nate Jake. Well, I mean, Joseph Nguyen was kind of he was still in the Dom era, but
yeah, that's right.
But after that Dom era ended, some of those players that we brought in, especially when we started to bring in Latin American or Latin players, Hispanic players, started bringing in more Central American players. You said Alexander Lopez, and I think that's an interesting player to call out because he came in during the Dom era, and I thought he got enough of a fair shake, but he struggled in certain matches in certain positions, and frankly, he would have never succeeded under a coach like Owen Coyle or Wade Barrett for that matter. He just wasn't really in the position to succeed.
To answer Micho's question about the quality of player back then to now, yeah, the quality of player now is a lot higher than it is back then. The reason being, because there's more money in now, less money back then, obviously. But back then, you know, obviously you saw how many Hondurans we were bringing in and how many players from Central America or just small players. I mean, like I said, Leon Miranda was kind of that first, like, oh, we got ourselves an Argentine, He was kind of that first, we're gonna start dipping into South America a little bit, and obviously now, like Sean mentioned, with Kiki playing with Palominos in Italy, he played in Serie A, he plays for his national team, Slovenia or Slovakia. I don't remember which one.
I think it's Slovenia.
So obviously the level of player brought in now, it's going to be a lot higher. Darwin Quintero, I mean, Liga MX. I think he's playing for I think he's played for the Colombian national team a handful of times. I'm not sure how many times, to be honest, but it might have been a little bit more than a handful. I don't want to take anything away from him on that aspect, but yeah, I mean, the level of player from here on out is going to be a lot higher than what it was back then during that era, obviously, because there's just more money in MLS. I mean, I know as Dynamo fans and supporters, we don't we might not really see it because we're like, when are we going to bring in the big DP? When are we going to spend the money to bring in our David Beckham or our Terry Henry or our Chicharito or whatever? I mean, who knows? I mean, like I said, but aside from that, the level of player being bought in is greater than what it was back then.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Micho asks, unbiased, wholeheartedly, do you guys think our game plan will be able to keep up with the pace that the league is growing at? Statistically speaking, we're falling behind. No. I think there's a catch-22. I think we tend to, as fans, look at the top 5 teams, top 6 teams that are spending decent money for players, and we're going, oh man, we're falling behind. We're not falling behind. We're falling behind maybe 3 or 4 teams in particular. but we're not falling behind the league in general. I mean, there's a select few teams that are spending a lot of money, and then there's a lot of teams that aren't spending a lot of money. They're spending some money here and there, but Callow says it right. We're not falling behind. We just have a different strategy. We have a different approach. And to Callow's point, of course, it's tongue in cheek. Statistically speaking, we're not finishing dead last, so we're not falling behind. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, okay. So like, just to obviously the teams that we're talking about that were quote unquote falling behind is the teams like Atlanta United, LAFC, LA Galaxy, right? The ones who are bringing all the big stars in, supposedly, right? But you gotta think about it. When the Dynamo have been full squadded, I mean, we've competed with these teams. I mean, let's not forget we smashed Atlanta United 4-0 opening at home here. They smashed us last year. I mean, we were down 10 men, whatever. We've given hell to LA Galaxy, even when we're been at the lower end of the league. We give them hell to them with Ibrahimovic, with Pavone, with whatever star they've had throughout their history. We've always given them hell. LAFC, the brief times that we played against them, I mean, we've showed that we can hang with them. Like the unfortunate thing is that under Wilmer, and we stated this in prior shows, we've never been a full 90-minute team. And that's where the scorelines show differently. That's where they show up in the scoreline ends up being 4-2 LAFC, when in reality, the game was 2-1 or 1-1. It got out of hand for those 10, 15 minutes at the end where they just scored goals on us because we weren't a full, complete team that can go 90 minutes.
I think Callow makes a good point too. The Galaxy can't exist without a big name. That's the way they've kind of built their franchise at this point. They have to have, they've never not had a really big name on their team. He notes their fans are really way more fickle than ours are.
Especially now. I mean, think about it, Sean. If you had a choice to be a LA Galaxy supporter or LAFC supporter, if you were just branded to MLS, which way would you go? I mean, like if you did your research and everything, which way would you go?
Do I live in LA? That's the real question. Do I live in LA or do I live in Carson? Because I mean, if I live in Carson, then it's Galaxy. But if I live actually in LA, then I got to go LAFC, right?
But I mean, what I'm trying to prove out is the way that LA Galaxy is built as opposed to the way LAFC is built is completely different. Even though, both teams have their big stars, but the way the teams are built are completely different. LAFC from top to bottom, they're a more established, more well-oiled machine. LA Galaxy from top to bottom, they're top heavy. They're top heavy. Their bottom, their fourth 25% of that team, they're just filling people in from their Galaxy 2 or whoever they can get on, whatever, they're top heavy. LAFC is more balanced. They're the more balanced team, and obviously now with the competition and the way that they're dominating the league, the only way LA Galaxy seems to be able to stay competitive with them is to bring a big star. And unfortunately for them, they have the backing. They have AAG backing them with money, and they can do that. They bring in players like Beckham and Ibrahimovic and Chicharito and all that stuff. But if you're telling me which route I would take to build a team, would it be LA Galaxy's route or LAFC's? I'm taking LAFC 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. Because that team is more complete for international competitions, for MLS season. That's why they dominated the season so well last season. You can sit Vela for a couple games. You can sit Rossi for a couple games. You can have somebody in and out, and that team is still running.
So I like his question. He says, Micho says, what's at stake this first game versus LA Galaxy? He says, if we lose, what do we take away from that? For me, look, I'm expecting to win that match. I think I even have that as a win.
I knocked you down 5-2.
Huh? What?
5-3. Sorry, 5-3.
I had it 5-3. Yeah, that's right. It was trouncing. It was amazing. Yes. I have us winning that match pretty big, but The reason is because LA traditionally starts slow, and Chicharito is a slow starter as well, and traditionally as a team they're slow starters. So getting to play them the first match of the season, that plays into our hand. Now, if we come out and we're a little sluggish, or we're slow to catch up, or things aren't working right, I can accept that if Tab's able to make changes on the fly, if he's able to tactically keep pace with, with Scalotto. And I think he will be able to. I don't think Tab's going to shy away from making tactical changes if it's needed. But on the flip side, I don't think that we're going to struggle. I think we're going to come out and we're going to be, because again, most of the attack is the same. Most of our defense is the same. We've changed a few pieces. We've added a few pieces, but at the same time, most positions are still the same. And I think that enables us to play our way right out of the gate. That enables us to be an attack team right out of the gate. And starting at home, that is always a boon for us. That is always a huge win for us. So, huge
What if we
win.
lose, John?
But what if we do lose? If we lose, then I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'm okay with that as long as Tab shows that he's capable of making tactical changes, comfortable making tactical changes, and as long as he's not waiting until the 75th minute to make the first change. That's my big thing. I want to see a coach that's willing to go out there in the 60th minute and make a change if it's needed.
So, like, my answer to that question, if we were to lose, like I said, I mean, it's the first game of the season. It's kind of hard to predict sometimes, because it's one of those things where you can have a 4-0 thrashing like you did against Atlanta United 2 years ago, or you can have a 1-1 tie like we did last year with all the hype after we, started off well in CONCACAF Champions League. But if we end up losing that game, I mean, like I said, I think I'm on board with Sean. I just want to see that there's progress and that the team is looking good, because, like I said, this is soccer. The team can play damn near perfect, and it'll still end up a 0-0 scoreline or a 1-0 loss. The ball sometimes just doesn't go your way, and sometimes the ball doesn't hit the back of the net for whatever reason. But like, as long as the team looks great, not like great, just looks good, and they look like they know where to be, they know what positions to be, they know where to go. With the passes and formation wise and all that stuff. And obviously the same thing with Tab. I want to see how involved he is with the players, how much he's speaking to them, like, hey, go over here, go over here. How soon is he willing to make his changes? His substitutions too are going to matter for that game as well, especially if they're losing at home. I mean, who's the first one off the bench? That's going to tell me a lot to see who he has confidence in. Who's the first one to come out?
Tommy Mac, baby.
Who's the first one to come off the pitch? Like, and why? What was that player doing? Are we just changing formations, or is that player sucking, or or is he one of those players that was on fringe and he just happened to be the better player in preseason, so that's why he got the starting 11 over somebody else? It's a lot of things that you have to take into account for that first game of the season, because that starting 11, for as much as we want that starting 11 to be the starting 11 consistently, surprised if the starting 11 from game 1 to game 2 you might have 2 or 3 different players coming in and out, because that game 1 shows you a lot, like who's really ready. Like we said earlier, what if Tab does give Palomino a chance to start, and he just doesn't show up for whatever reason, then obviously I don't expect to see him week 2. I expect to see somebody a little bit more veteran presence or whatever, or if he starts Tomas at the 10th spot, and Tomas just isn't living up to what it is, and he moves Darwin from the left flank to the 10th spot, and he puts Memo on the left. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, a lot of possible things. That first game is, like I said, it's a lot of different possibilities, especially when you're losing at home for the opening game match, and especially because that atmosphere is supposed to be electric. I'm thinking it's gonna be electric because of all the hype around it. So
There are things planned for the first match of the season that are going to be very different than in years past. For those that were able to attend the chant night last week on Friday, I will tell you guys, I didn't have a chance to attend. I had other prior arrangements and commitments, but talking to people. It was a very important gathering. And I will tell you guys this, that look, a lot of the things that people have complained about from a supporter's perspective, in terms of, where's the supporters before the first whistle? Why does it take them so long to get in the stadium? Look, those things are being addressed, and I feel like they've been addressed. I think you're going to see a very different approach this season when it comes to the supporters groups, a very different approach to I mean, he might do that too. A very different different focus for the supporters groups this year, and it all starts and kind of ends with Hustletown, in my opinion. And kudos to the front office, and kudos to El Batallon, to Texan Army, to Surge, to Bandera Negra, to the Houston Independent Supporters. All of these groups that have put time and effort into really trying to be, to let this thing kind of be an organic growth thing. It is, and it has been. And the effect is going to be felt. It is going to be real. But on the flip side of that, look, the supporters groups can't do it all by themselves. It takes effort, and it takes engagement from other fans in the stadium. If you're one of those fans that likes to go into the stadium and sit and watch a soccer match, then, by all means do that. But just be aware that, don't hate on your neighbor or the person in front of you because they're getting into the chants, they're getting into the songs, they're standing up during corner kicks. Nothing irks me more than having a fan that sits in the front row or the second row being yelled at by fans behind them because they're standing up during some part of the match. The fact is, if you're at a soccer match, you should expect people to stand up all around the stadium. And like I said, it's going to be an intense atmosphere. It really is. And look, if you're interested in kind of experiencing some of that, hit up Hustletown. You can hit them up on Twitter. I think it's at Hustletown Supporters. Sergio can correct me if he's listening or watching. I'm sure Mark can pull it up too. But there's also, if you guys are interested in joining a group, there's the Surge, there's Texan Army, there's El Batallon. Look, if El Batallon's not your cup of tea because they're a little bit too radical in their approach, then, hit up and talk to TA, or hit up and talk to the Surge, or hit up and talk to Bandera Negra. These groups are there for a reason. And I can tell you the work that Jeff and Sergio have put in this offseason to build the foundation for something like the Surge, it's pretty impressive to kind of watch. And I hope if you guys haven't had a chance to talk to them about it and have a chance to do so, you definitely should, because I think the Surge are here to change some opinions about the supporters groups, I think, in general.
As a fan, or fans out there who aren't in a supporter group, I guess there's a level of supporter group for everybody. You can go from TA all the way to El Batallon, depending on your level of crazy that you want to be. So there's something out there for everybody. There's a cup of tea for everybody out there. So it just depends on how rowdy you want to be, or how laid back you want to be, or how chill you want to be. I mean, it's all, like I said, it's all love out there. And we're out there for the same mission, to support the Dynamo and to help push them through when they're tired out there, making sure that they get those last 10 minutes with with passion and with heart, and that's what supporter groups do. And that's what I think everybody in this chat and everybody affiliated with a supporter group, or even just fans in general, are trying to get to, as they grow this Hustletown brand.
Micho asked a valid question. I think there's a lot of fans out there that ask that, want to know the answer to that. Can you join a group while being a season ticket holder in a different section? I mean, the answer is absolutely 100% yes.
Yes.
If you're interested in more information, I'll get Sergio or Jeff to reach out to you and talk to you about that for sure. But even going beyond what Cal is saying, just by the supporters membership, I mean, there's the Hustletown supporter membership that's $35, but there's also you get the opportunity to talk to different to different leaders. Sorry, I blanked there. Leaders of different supporters groups, and there are some that the expectation is you do sit in their section, but there are some that frankly don't care. They just want you to. They just want want you to understand what it means to be a supporter and support however you want to support, and that has to be okay.
Yeah, and think about it. I mean, regardless of what your cup of tea is, let's say you want to join a supporter group and you sit in section 126 or whatever, because I mean you got some badass seats. Nobody's gonna blame you for that. Hey, but you know what you can do by being a supporter member? You can go pregame with the supporter group. You can go get riled up for the start of the game. You can go to the functions and to the community activities that they're going to be involved with or whatever. And obviously the whole perks of being involved with something with a club that you love. Otherwise you wouldn't be there, or otherwise you wouldn't have season tickets. You wouldn't invest that kind of money on something that you weren't passionate about. So, while I understand the sorry. Well, I understand the conflict here of whether I want to give up my seats to go stand for 90 minutes with a group. Yeah, I mean, you can do both. I mean, you just got to find the group that best suits you, and trust me, there's groups out there. And what better situation to be in when you're pre-gaming with people who have the same interest and love for the Dynamo as you?
I'm typing. Keep going.
No, Callum. It's like prom. Pick which one you want to go with. Man, well, and this prom, you got multiple choices, people. So choose wisely. No, but yeah, like I said, I mean, it's one of those things. And for Micho, who has who says DM. I mean, I'll send you the info as soon as we get off from here. I'll send you the info for the surge and all that stuff. And I'm sure you follow all the supporter groups as well. And if you don't, I mean, I'll send you their handles as well, so that way you can get in touch with them and ask them to give you information and better notify you. Because, like I said, I'm not trying to be biased to one group or another. It's at the end of the day, all we want is for you to be there supporting Orange, supporting the Dynamo. That's the end goal for everything, regardless if you choose it Batillon, TA, Surge, Bandera Negra, or whatever, or if you make your own, the Michorizos, like you said. I don't care. I just want you at the stadium cheering for the Dynamo. That's my 2 cents on that. And I'm pretty sure Sean agrees with that as well.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna say something, and I don't know how much I'm at liberty to say, but I'm gonna say it. So, coming up for this first match, for the first time in a very long time, there is going to be a march to the match that all the supporters groups are participating in. And for those that are curious, this has been something that's been asked for by fans for years, to see the supporters groups marching into the match together. And what is especially impressive about this, guys, is that the supporters groups are going to march into the match. Their intent is to march into the match, to be into the stadium 30 minutes before the match starts at minimum.
30 minutes?
30 minutes at minimum. At minimum, 30 minutes before the match starts. I know, right? Look. I've been one of the ones that have harped on the supporters groups in the past for, taking so long to get into the stadium. And I've talked to Cisco about this, because Cisco is part of El Batallon and part of La Banda. And he's made the point in chat before, about how, unfortunately some of that fell to the Dynamo security. Well, I can tell you the Hustletown supporters group, supporters kind of alliance, coalition, whatever you want to call that, the kind of
collision, the conglomerate,
whatever, that team or that group, of the leaders get together of all the supporters groups, and they talk regularly, and they get a chance to talk with the front office, one-on-one directly, and it's making significant improvements in that area, and the front office understands that the supporters groups can really be legitimately a really true atmosphere for the stadium and for the matches and also for for other fans as well. And so that's why they've poured a lot of time and effort into it. And so I say all that to say, if you've kind of shrugged off the supporters groups in the past because they've not been very committed, or you felt that they haven't been very committed, or you haven't agreed with some of the stuff that's going on, this is the season to kind of give it another chance. This is the season to be open to seeing what they have to offer, because look, Sergio and Jeff aren't out there pounding aren't out there working their butts off for nothing. These guys have put in a lot of effort and a lot of time to see the Surge launch and see the Surge grow, and their core leadership team is an impressive group. And look, TA's out there, they're working very hard as well, and I promise you EB's working just as hard. Vendetta Negra are working hard to prep for the season, and all in all, I think if you guys just give it a chance for this first match of the season, I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised. But just have an open mind about it. Don't go in with any preconceived notions about how it should be or how it's going to be. Just be willing to participate and engage. And at the end of the day, that's all it takes to really be a supporter, is participate and be engaged.
And man, you never know what you might become the fan that you dreaded the most, and you might become one of those loud, obnoxious yellers with their shirts off, colored orange. Who knows? You never know what it might turn you to, and then how much you want to be a part of it, because when you're involved with a group of people who have the same interests, well, and this interest being obviously the Dynamo, as you'd be surprised what you're willing to do. Flying solo, you can only fly solo so much and do so much solo, but when you have a band of people who have the same mission as you, the sky's the limit, man. No, Micho, they're not called Hustle Town because of SPM, but no, nothing. Let's stay far away from that.
What you got, man?
George, yeah. So obviously, for those who are thinking about joining the supporter groups, obviously EB, they hang out at Kings Court. TA, are they still pitch 25? Sean? Okay.
I don't. No. Yeah, sorry. TA, their bar is not pitch 25. They tailgate, bro.
Okay. I'm sorry. And then and the Surge, obviously this being their first season as a supporter group, their pregame is going to be at Rodeo Goat. So like I said, even though you might not want to go stand 90 minutes with those guys in the supporter groups, man, you can go pregame and have drinks with these guys, and talk up Dynamo and make new friends and network, and and who knows, you might find your new best friend there, or your partner in life. Who knows?
You laugh, Mark, but people have found their significant. People have legit found their significant other by being a member of a supporters group. The former president of TA, his wife, they met because of a Texian Army at a Texian Army tailgate. So don't knock it. You make jokes, but the jokes actually happen.
No, I've heard that behind the jokes is a lot of truth. So
I feel like you just pulled that out of your ass.
No, it's truth. There's a lot of truth behind jokes. So and like I said, even though I'm being lighthearted about it, it's a way that you can meet people and network. Like I said, I met Sean through the people from the Surge. That never would have happened. That connection would have never happened. So there you go. Now you see me and him, we're here, partners.
That's right. Amy and Ben. Y'all were already friends, but yeah, it's
mom.
Look, when you can see somebody at their sloppy drunkest and you can still appreciate and love them, I guarantee you that's love for life right there.
Yep. I can.
Mark's like I can't say anything further. That's kind of mic drop moment. That was pretty good.
Yeah. I'm married for a reason.
Callow. Oh man, it is 9 o'clock, guys. It is time to close this down. I appreciate you guys being active and engaged tonight. Appreciate you guys joining in the chat and talking with us, and appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys are watching after the fact, do us a favor and please like and subscribe and share the video out, especially if it's over the weekend or early next week. Do us a favor, share that video, because it helps us grow our subscriber count. Again, if we can get to 100 soon, we can get a custom URL, and everything's going to pop off then. I'm just saying, everything's going to pop off. But seriously, guys, thanks for joining us.
Have a good night.
If I could build you up, don't bring me down, bring me down. If I fall, then would you lift me up? Would you lift me up or bring me down?
They would like to start the beginning of a revolution.